I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a really exciting time to be in journalism because of the technological changes that are occurring. I've talked in classes here before about, the World Herald's sort of slow journey on the internet. And I was just telling Robin before we were starting, we're doing a project next week related to Afghanistan that's going to have a lot of online interactive content, and I'm involved in that. And that would have been something that, even 5 years ago wouldn't have been possible at the World Herald, wouldn't have been something that I would have been doing or even particularly interested in. So things have changed quite a bit, even at a slow-to-change place like the Omaha World Herald. Obviously, the scary part to me, and I'm sure to everybody else up here, is that there's been rounds of layoffs at almost every newspaper in the country. It feels like, at least at the World Herald, the situation's stabilized. And obviously, though, moving forward, newspapers in particular need to figure out a way to make money online, and either through advertising, through subscription, through other means, or I think newspapers are in some long-term trouble if they don't figure that out. The good news is that I think newspapers are at least attempting at this point to start to try to figure that out, which is movement compared to 2 or 3 years ago.
And I would add to that also that journalism is just kind of everything right now in terms of the media that you're actually using to tell your story. Like us in radio, and we haven't done it fully, but that's what we're trying to move towards, is that, you get your radio story, and it used to be, that's kind of where it would end. You'd get your audio, and, that would be it. Now we have to think, okay, well, what photographs can we can go along with the story? Is there video that we can shoot that can go along with the story? We have to convert it to print so that we can put it on the web, and then we have to, share it on Facebook and Twitter, and it's like your story never ends. It just continues to, there's so many different things that you can do with it. There's so many extras. There's so many more people that you can reach with it. And, I mean, you just have to think about your story in just such a completely different way, whereas before you just write it, air it, move on. But it's also fun. It's really fun to do that. Mm-hmm.
I think sort of just building on what Matthew and Robin have said, all of that, the changes that are occurring, presents some issues for journalism education, which is part of what I think the School of Communication as well as other universities are struggling with right now. On the one hand, we have to train students to go out for jobs in print, in newspapers, on television, on the radio, in a traditional fashion. I mean, there are still jobs out there where they are going to expect you to have a certain amount of knowledge of a certain medium. At the same time, everything is changing so much, it's just, we cannot just teach students to write for newspapers anymore. They have to be able to do the video and the audio and, use blogs and various things. And we're kind of just moving toward teaching those things to students more than we have in the past. And so that's part of the challenge facing us. I mean, I think journalism is going to continue to exist, but in what forms, it's difficult to say sometimes.
I try to watch sort of what's happening on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of this, to see where we might be going. And a word that I see more and more often is disruption. Disruption of kind of the way things have been. And so I think one of the issues is sort of how we manage disruption, how we bring some order to the chaos. And I think in journalism, I was thinking about this. There was a posting, actually Steve Buttrey, who used to work at the World Herald and does a lot of this kind of thinking in Washington now, posted a video from, I believe, a link to, I think it was a Harvard business professor that I put on my Facebook wall this morning. And the gist of it was that, you have to kind of see where there is a need and work to that need, that those haven't gone away, but people have gone elsewhere to meet those needs. And so the traditional places, like perhaps the printed newspaper, may be fading as a location where we fill those kinds of needs for example, local news. And I think that's kind of interesting because I was at a summit last summer in New York, and one of the speakers was from the Washington Post, who said that their business model basically was if we could kind of limit the bleeding to 6% or so a year in lost revenues or lost readership or lost subscribers, that we could muddle along for 10 years or so under that condition. I think what's happening is actually happening more quickly than that, and so I think there are a lot of experiments underway right now, and nobody knows for sure which ones are going to actually take hold, but certainly the things that are going on in social media are where we're looking right now for some of the answers.
I'm assuming we're talking about, when we say blog, we're talking about, the stereotypical non-professional journalist sort of commenting in some way on their particular interest area of the news, or maybe we're talking about the Huffington Post, which is obviously been very successful. I don't know how successful they've been at making money until they were bought out. But a lot of what those sites do is actually take what I think we up here would consider to be traditional news, either from TV, radio, newspapers, aggregate it and comment on it. So it's interesting to think about. I don't think that necessarily makes it illegitimate. It maybe makes it harder to make money off it for the traditional news outlets. But clearly those stories are still a part of the conversation. I don't know if that necessarily answers the question, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than just legitimate versus not legitimate.
Any other thoughts on this?
I was just going to make one comment on sometimes blogs and feedback from readers, which Caitlin was talking about, actually serves as sort of a check on traditional journalism. They find errors or problems or instances where photos have been doctored or something, and they'll report on that. Maybe they've appeared that way on a website or in a print publication or something. So I think that having a variety of ways for the public to give feedback to the traditional media can actually serve a good function. At the same time, there are just a lot of voices out there, and you do kind of have to learn how to sift them out, I guess, figuring out which ones you trust and which ones you don't.
Absolutely.
One way to divide this world is that which is news/journalism, so defined, and everything else that is not. I think in both cases, trust matters. If it's not news and it's public relations, trust still matters for PR professionals and the people who pay attention to them, whether it be journalists or the public. And I think I only need to use a two-letter word, BP, and you either trust what they're saying or you don't right now, and information keeps kind of leaking out, as it were, that gives people reasons not to trust what the PR was saying. And so I think as these things stream on a Facebook feed or on a Twitter feed, as I look at them, I use the same skills I always use as a journalist to judge credibility. Do I believe it or not? I think it is interesting what Dr. Wilson is saying, because there are times when if I post something, I might not have an initial feeling of skepticism, but somebody brings a point up that I hadn't thought about, and then we have a conversation about that. So I think there is sort of a reality check that goes on in this environment now, and everybody just needs to be aware that if you're posting, people are watching and people are judging.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Everything you post can and will come back to you if need be. But everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, but it's just sifting through the opinions versus the actual facts, which I think I agree with everyone. I mean, people know their trusted news source and know what to follow just because everyone else has a voice. And a lot of blogs are more just subjective, but hopefully, you know, anytime you look up any sort of news story, the difference between a trusted news source and someone's opinion on a blog is very apparent. And you know, and everyone can have a voice, as I mentioned, but when it comes to the real journalistic story and the facts, I think it's kind of easy to find the difference.